It was just a walk home. A simple, quiet walk home. 14-year-old Malik James had just left the neighborhood park, sneakers tapping softly against the sun-warmed pavement. The echoes of basketball still played in his head, his earbuds pumping lo-fi beats only he could hear. A plastic bag of chips swung from his fingers. Hoodie up, shoulders relaxed, eyes half closed under the afternoon sun. He wasn't doing anything wrong. Not trespassing, not tagging walls, not stealing bikes or smashing windows. He was just walking back to his uncle's house, where he'd spent nearly every weekend that summer. But to one man watching from his porch, that was more than enough. Gregory Holt, 62, white, retired, bitter. The kind of man who mowed his lawn twice a week and called the police when leaves fell from the neighbor's tree onto his driveway. The kind of man who always had something to say about who belonged and who didn't. And when he saw Malik, he didn't see a child. He didn't see someone's nephew. He didn't even see a person. He saw a threat. From behind darkened sunglasses, Gregory watched Malik stroll past the pastel-colored houses and perfect lawns, eyes narrowing like a loaded gun. His arms crossed. His breath tightened. The sun was hot, but his rage was cold. Then he moved. Fast. Malik barely saw him coming. Just a flicker of motion in the corner of his eye. A man crossing the street with hard steps, one hand already behind his back. "Hey!" Gregory shouted. Malik turned, confused. And then, pop pop. Two sharp cracks tore through the air. A sprinkler twitched and tipped sideways. Birds scattered from a rooftop. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. And on the sidewalk, Malik crumpled, face down, blood soaking into his hoodie. The chips spilled like confetti on the pavement. One earbud still dangling from his ear, buzzing static. His phone vibrated once, then stopped. The street went quiet. No one screamed. No doors opened. Curtains fluttered, then fell still. Behind tinted windows and smart security systems, the neighbors stayed inside, frozen in fear or in guilt, or worse, indifference. Gregory stood over the boy's body, his handgun still warm in his palm. He breathed slowly, then calmly slid the weapon into a holster clipped to his belt. No panic, no remorse. He didn't kneel. He didn't check Malik's pulse. He didn't call for help. He just walked back toward his porch, as if he'd swatted a fly. Minutes later, the sirens came. Red and blue lights danced across the million-dollar facades of luxury homes. Officers stepped out, cautious at first, then relaxed when they saw Gregory standing with arms loose at his sides. He was cooperative, they said. He was respectful, they noted. He was white, they didn't have to say. They offered him water. They nodded while he talked. No handcuffs. No raised voices. No real questions. As Malik lay lifeless on the hot concrete, a crime scene tech casually tossed up yellow tape. Another officer scribbled in a notebook. A third adjusted the angle of a traffic cone. And that's when the black sedan pulled up. The door opened fast. Out stepped Dominic James, Malik's uncle, a man who wore his silence like armor. 43, self-made tech mogul, charcoal suit, sharp jawline, eyes like cut glass. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked. Past the tape. Past the officers. Past the whispers. He knelt beside Malik. And for a moment, the man everyone in Silicon Valley called the architect looked like a statue, unmoving. His hand reached out, trembling, then paused. He touched Malik's shoulder and pulled back like it burned him. Dominic stood slowly. His eyes locked on a Gregory Holt, still standing, still talking, still free. And in that instant, something shifted. This wasn't just grief. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was war. Dominic James had built an empire out of nothing. From a cramped apartment in South LA to a penthouse overlooking the skyline, he clawed his way up through code, contracts, and sheer force of will. He didn't inherit money. He earned it. Every line of software, every sleepless night, every handshake with men who didn't expect someone like him to sit at the table. It all added up. And now, none of it meant a damn thing. Not when his nephew was lying dead on a sidewalk, 2 holes in his chest for the crime of walking home. Back at the crime scene, the officers didn't see Dominic's rage, but they felt it in the way he stared. in the silence that hovered around him like a thundercloud waiting to split the sky. "Please step back, sir," one officer said, hand raised. Dominic didn't move. "Sir, we're still collecting evidence." "Like hell you are," Dominic replied, voice low, steady like steel pressed flat. He pointed to the nearby lamppost. "That's a city camera. Where's the footage?" The officer hesitated, then mumbled something about it taking time. Another stepped in. "We're treating this as a possible case of self-defense." Dominic turned his head slowly, like the words themselves were offensive. "Self-defense?" he asked. "Against what?" No one answered. And just a few feet away, Gregory Holt leaned against a squad car, sipping from a plastic bottle of water like he'd just finished mowing the lawn. His shirt was tucked in, his hair combed, his voice casual as he gave a voluntary statement. Dominic's fists clenched in his pockets. They weren't treating him like a killer. They were treating him like a concerned citizen, a man who'd done his duty, a protector of property, the protector of their kind of neighborhood. But Dominic? He saw through it. He saw everything. The curtain of civility, the fake smiles, the subtle nods between officers, the lie being quietly constructed before the body was even bagged. This wasn't going to be an arrest. It was going to be a cover-up. When Dominic demanded to see the body cam footage, he was told it wasn't available yet. When he asked if Gregory had been tested for gunpowder residue, they couldn't comment on active procedures. When he asked if anyone had called Malik's mother, the officer blinked. And that was it. Dominic didn't cry. He didn't scream. He planned. Hours later, he sat in the front lobby of the precinct. Alone, silent, notepad in hand, phone on his lap. He'd already called 3 lawyers, 2 reporters, a judge he'd helped during a corporate data leak 4 years back. No one had answers. Everyone had protocol. Through the glass door of the interview room, he saw Gregory slouched in a chair, legs stretched, one hand rubbing his jaw. He looked bored. Inside, he spun a story about a strange kid acting suspicious, about how the boy was casing homes, about how he feared for his safety. Dominic watched the officer interviewing him, nodding, smiling. Not a single challenge. Then came the footage. The cop showed him a blurry, chopped-up video from a street cam. Grainy, skipping frames. The shooting itself was missing. 1 second Malik was walking. The next, freeze frame. "We're still reviewing," an officer said. "That's all we have." Dominic leaned in, studying the screen. Malik's figure, small, slouched calm. A kid walking home from a park. That's all. And yet they were treating him like a criminal. Again, Dominic stood. "I want a copy." "Sorry," the officer replied. "It's evidence." Dominic stared at him for a full 10 seconds, then turned and walked out. That night, rain pattered against the stained glass of a church. Inside, grief had no words. The pews were full. Neighbors, classmates, teachers, strangers. All of them sitting in silence. Malik's mother barely moved, body shaking as she leaned over the coffin. Dominic stood beside her, one hand on her back. No tears, no tremble, just pressure, steady and unrelenting. Then he walked to the podium. No notes, no quotes, just truth. He was walking home, he said, wearing a hoodie, carrying snacks, and someone decided that was enough to kill him. He paused. The silence was suffocating. They didn't ask questions. They didn't shout. They didn't check. They just pulled the trigger. That's not self-defense. That's not confusion. That's hunting. Another pause. "I'm not asking for justice anymore," he said. "I'm taking it." He stepped down, and the church? Dead silent. Not one clap. Not one cough. Just the weight of a vow, hanging in the air like smoke before a fire. The rain didn't stop that night. It came down steady, not in sheets, but in cold, whispering threads that clung to windows and gutters, like the sky itself couldn't stop mourning. But inside Dominic James' penthouse, there was no time for grief. He hadn't slept since the funeral. Not a second. The lights in his apartment were dim, the curtains drawn, the silence thick. On the long glass table in his living room sat an open laptop, 3 phones, and a notepad already halfway, filled with sharp, angled handwriting. Every number he needed was already on speed dial. Every contact had been quietly messaged. Dominic wasn't a man who panicked. He strategized. At 1:12 a.m., he made the first call. "I need a sweep," he said. "All cameras, public and private, street posts, doorbells, smart lights, everything." At 1:34, a black SUV rolled up outside the gated community where his nephew had been killed. Two men stepped out, plain clothes, no badges. Not police, not FBI. These were elite, ex-military, ex-NSA, private contractors now working under the table. By 2:07, every camera within 5 blocks had been identified, logged, and quietly accessed. Inside the penthouse, Dominic was already 3 steps ahead. He opened an encrypted messaging app and sent a single image, a headshot of Gregory Holt, pulled from public records, to an anonymous contact known only by a handle, syntax_black. An elite hacker, a ghost in the machine, expensive, quiet, untouchable. Dominic didn't care about the cost. He cared about results. "Dig into everything," he messaged. Email, photos, old forums, neighborhood posts. "Anything you try to delete, I want it back." Seconds later, lines of code began to scroll across his screen. One by one, pieces of Gregory's digital life surfaced like bones in the dirt. There were old group messages from the neighborhood watch, filled with complaints about suspicious kids and changing demographics. Photos from backyard barbecues where Gregory posed with a Confederate flag mug. Posts from now-deleted message boards, crude jokes, bitter rants, hate in plain text. Dominic copied it all. He created 2 folders. One labeled GH_backup. The other, release if needed. This wasn't about gossip. He didn't want tabloid drama. He wanted proof. At 3:17 a.m., a ping hit Dominic's screen. One of the cameras, a doorbell cam from a hardware store around the corner, had caught everything. The full shooting. Malik walking with his hoodie up. No erratic movements. No trespassing. Just walking. Then Gregory, storming from his porch. Gun in hand. No warning. No hesitation. Bang. Bang. The boy drops. Dominic watched it once. Then again. The third time, he paused the video the moment Gregory raised his gun, froze on his face. There was no fear in those eyes. No panic. Just certainty. The look of a man who had already decided this was going to happen. Dominic leaned back. The room around him was dark, but the glow of the screen painted his face in cold light. He copied the footage onto 3 separate drives. Then he uploaded it to a secure cloud server under a false identity. Then he sent it to his attorney, a top civil rights journalist, and a media contact who owed him a favor. No more editing. No more claims of missing footage. This was the truth, raw and unflinching. At 4:14 a.m., he uploaded the video to a private channel titled Malik James, The Real Story. No voiceover, no caption, just the date, the timestamp, the moment, and the gunshot. By sunrise, the world had seen it. First, a small activist blog picked it up, then a major news outlet, then exploded. Within hours, the video had gone viral, shared by athletes, musicians, celebrities, teachers, students, parents, everyone. The outrage wasn't quiet. It was ferocious. Hashtags flooded the internet. Hashtag Justice for Malik. Hashtag Walking While Black. Hashtag We See You. The story hit national TV. Clips ran on cable news. Protesters gathered outside Gregory's house. Signs rose into the air. Candles were lit. Photos of Malik, smiling, goofy, young, filled every screen. Still no arrest. Still no charges. Gregory's blinds stayed closed. Police said the case was under review. But Dominic? He didn't post a thing. Didn't tweet. Didn't comment. He just watched. And waited. Because the world had seen the truth now. And truth, once lit, spreads like fire. The morning after the video dropped, Gregory Holt House looked like the center of a storm. Not a single brick had moved. The porch light still didn't work. The grass was still trimmed, but the silence around it had been shattered. At first, it was just a few people. Quiet, angry, holding signs. Then it was dozens. Then hundreds. Reporters lined the curb. Drones hovered in the air. People brought candles, photos, megaphones. They didn't chant at first. They just stared at the house, at the blinds that never opened. At the windows where Gregory once stood tall. Some held up screenshots from the video. Others held up Malik's school photo, the one where he wore a blue hoodie and a crooked grin. And over it all, one question echoed again and again. Why is he still free? Inside his penthouse, Dominic James sat in front of 4 monitors, each playing a different news channel. The footage ran again and again, Malik walking calmly, Gregory approaching, the gun, the shots. It was undeniable. And yet, the system still hesitated. Still no warrant. Still no statement from the district attorney. Still no handcuffs. But Dominic knew this playbook. When they can't deny the evidence, they do something worse. They attack the victim. By noon, the headlines had started to shift. Not all of them. Not the honest ones. But the ones you'd expect. The channels with sleek studios, smug hosts, and thinly veiled racism cloaked in concern. They flashed blurry photos of Malik from months ago. Ones where he wore different hoodies. Ones where he posed with friends. One photo, dark, out of focus, showed him standing near someone smoking. Gang signs, one host asked. Look closely. Another segment showed a screenshot of Malik holding up 2 fingers, a peace sign. But is it really? The anchor smirked. One host even had the nerve to ask, where were his parents? Dominic watched it all, jaw locked. He didn't throw anything. He didn't shout at the screen. He prepared. That night, he opened the folder he had named Release If Needed. Inside were pages and pages of damning information on Gregory Holt. A complaint filed by a delivery driver who said Gregory followed him through the neighborhood, accusing him of stealing. A police report from 7 years ago. A 15-year-old boy claimed Gregory aimed a gun at him during a bike ride. Emails from HOA meetings, Gregory using words like cleaning up the neighborhood. Forum posts under anonymous usernames traced back to Gregory's IP, filled with hate, venom, and fear disguised as concern. And then there was the email, sent just 2 weeks before Malik's death. Next time one of them walks down my block, I'm not asking questions. Dominic didn't need to twist the story. He didn't fabricate anything. He didn't leak fake rumors. He just uploaded the truth. A journalist at a major outlet ran it that same night under the headline. A pattern of hate, the history behind the man who shot Malik James. And just like that, the story cracked wide open. The protests didn't slow. They grew. Now, they weren't just calling for justice. They were reading from the files Dominic released. One by one, protesters stood with printed screenshots, taking turns shouting out. The year. The incident. The people Gregory had threatened. Someone splashed red paint across his garage door. Someone else tossed a worn-out hoodie onto his lawn. Still no arrest. But the ground beneath Gregory Holt was crumbling. Then, he made a mistake. At 9:43 p.m., Gregory went live. He started a live stream from behind the blinds of his darkened living room. Face flushed, voice shaking with anger. They're lying, he barked. I'm not the villain here. I was protecting my neighborhood. He never said Malik's name. He talked about fear, about crime, about outsiders, about entitlement. He called it a witch hunt. Within minutes, the chat filled with viewers. Some were his supporters. Most were not. Screenshots of his videos spread like wildfire. One tweet read, "If you're still defending this man, watch this." Dominic watched the stream from his penthouse. Calm, focused. Then he called his lawyer. He's live. He's ranting, Dominic said. The lawyer replied, Good. Let him keep talking. Because every word Gregory spat into the camera was being recorded, saved, cataloged, filed under evidence. And as the feed continued, the world finally saw who Gregory Holt really was. Not a neighbor, not a protector, not a victim, but a man whose fear became a bullet, and whose arrogance would become his downfall. The next morning, the internet was a battlefield. Two stories were fighting for control of the truth. On one side, the video, raw, clear, final. Malik James walking, Gregory Holt shooting. No confrontation, no threat, just execution. On the other side, a smear campaign, fast, coordinated, and vicious. Malik's face was everywhere now. But not just the smiling photo from his school ID, not the one where he held a basketball and wore a crooked grin. Now, hosts on certain networks were showing different images, shadows and grain, screen grabs from old social media posts twisted out of context. One anchor pointed at a freeze frame. "Is that a gang sign?" Another asked, "Why didn't this boy stay in his own neighborhood?" They dissected his hoodie. They picked apart his pace. They highlighted his posture like it was evidence. Not one of them showed the full video. Not one dared play the audio. Not one said what everyone had seen with their own eyes. Malik didn't do anything wrong. Dominic James saw it all. He sat in the dark, backlit by the quiet glow of monitors, watching the story twist and bend like smoke, trying to choke out a flame. He didn't panic. He didn't argue online. Instead, he opened a folder labeled Assets. It wasn't just a list of names. It was a network. Journalists who had covered civil rights stories for years. Activists with platforms that move the needle. Legal experts. Former law enforcement officers turned advocates. And a private research team, ex-intelligence, trained to dig without leaving fingerprints. He sent them everything. But that was just the beginning. Dominic didn't just want to defend Malik's memory. He wanted to expose everything. The team started with Gregory's past. What they found wasn't surprising, just buried. Gregory Holt had a pattern. They uncovered a real estate complaint from 2013. A black couple trying to view a home in Gregory's neighborhood had been followed and questioned by an aggressive local resident. An HOA report from 2015. Gregory was caught on camera placing flyers in mailboxes urging residents to stay vigilant about unfamiliar individuals. An anonymous letter sent to a local paper in 2017 warning about a man making threats to teens riding bikes after dark. The street address? Gregory's. None of it had stuck. Nothing ever made headlines. Until now. Dominic organized the files, labeled them cleanly, and prepared them for release. But not through a press conference. Not through interviews. He sent them directly to a top reporter at the Sentinel, a rising legal analyst with over 1 million followers on social media, and a civil rights organization known for launching high-profile public cases. Each packet came with a note. They said there was no history. They were wrong. Let the people decide. By that night, the second wave had hit. News anchors who once repeated self-defense now read through Gregory's past out loud, page by page. Legal blogs ran timelines of incidents, showing a man who had always operated on fear, always assumed the worst of people who didn't look like him, always hid behind the word safety. And yet, there were still people trying to hold the old line. Online forums filled with defenders. He was scared. He was protecting his community. Why was the kid even there? But those arguments were getting weaker. Louder, yes, but emptier. Because now, people were seeing the whole picture. Malik's school records came out. Clean. A video surfaced, him helping his cousin build a computer. Another, him explaining the periodic table to a friend on FaceTime. One classmate posted a photo, Malik covered in glue and glitter, building a science project for the school fair. Another wrote, he never even got attention. Dominic never spoke publicly. He didn't need to. The facts did the shouting for him. And when the smear campaign tried to twist Malik into a threat, Dominic simply pulled the curtain back and said, "Here, this is who you're really dealing with. Not a boy in a hoodie. A child. A dreamer. A victim." And as the truth dug its heels in, public opinion swung like a wrecking ball. No longer was this a debate. It was a reckoning. Gregory Holt thought the worst had passed. Sure, his name was on every news channel. Sure, protesters were outside his home daily. But he was still in his house. Still sleeping in his bed. Still sipping coffee on the back porch when the cameras weren't looking. He thought he'd ride out, like all the others had. But what he didn't know was that Dominic James had already bought the ground out from under him. It started with a quiet phone call. A friend in real estate owed Dominic a favor. The request was simple. Tell me everything you can about Gregory Holt's mortgage. The report came back within hours. Late payments. Twice in the last year. Behind on HOA dues. Behind on taxes. It wasn't public. Yet. But the foundation was already cracking. Dominic smiled, just slightly, and circled 3 numbers in red ink. Then he gave the instruction. Buy it. All of it. What followed was surgical. Dominic didn't use his name. Didn't leave a fingerprint. He used holding companies. Shell firms. Third-party bidders. Quiet channels that moved fast and didn't ask questions. By the end of the week, Gregory Holt's mortgage had a new owner, Dominic James. But he didn't make a scene. He waited, let the paperwork settle, let the signatures dry, until the moment came. It was a Tuesday morning when the final notice was mailed. A plain envelope, no warning label, just white paper and a deadline. Gregory opened it at his kitchen table, the same one where he'd once laughed with friends about keeping the neighborhood clean. Now, his hands trembled as he read the letter. Due to breach of mortgage contract, your property is now subject to foreclosure. It was real. It was signed. It was final. The name on the company? A number. A legal entity. But the truth? That envelope was Dominic's hand. Word spread fast. News outlets ran headlines. Shooter faces foreclosure amid protests. Man who killed teen now losing home. But why? Neighbors peeked through blinds. Some avoided him. Some packed up and left early. But the protesters? They stayed. And one morning, a moving truck showed up. Unmarked. Efficient. Professional. They didn't ask permission. They had the legal order. One by one, they began packing boxes, furniture, trophies, clothes, shelves, all of it. The silence was louder than any chant. And just when the last box was being loaded, a black luxury sedan pulled up. The door opened, and Dominic James stepped out. Charcoal suit. No sunglasses. Calm. Sharp. Icy. He didn't walk fast. He didn't say a word. He stepped to the edge of the lawn, not 1 inch further. Gregory stood on the porch, shoulders slumped, sweat on his brow. They locked eyes, and in the quiet, Dominic spoke, low, even final. I warned you. He gestured, just once, to the street behind him. Now I own the block, he said, we didn't belong on. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse. He turned, got back in the car, and left. The movers followed, and the door to Gregory Holt's home swung open just a crack as the wind passed through the now empty rooms. Dominic hadn't shouted. He hadn't threatened. He'd used the very system that had once protected men like Gregory and turned it into a weapon. Not with fists, not with fire, but with paper, with patience, with precision. By the end of the week, the once proud porch that had been Gregory's stage now sat bare. The HOA board, who once nodded in approval at Gregory's rants, were now fielding press calls and death threats. Some had already resigned. A few deleted their accounts. And Dominic? He wasn't done. Because he wasn't just taking back the block. He was taking back the narrative. And soon, he'd take it straight to court. It began not with a bang, but with a stamp. One thick manila envelope. Hand-delivered. Time-stamped. Sealed by the county clerk's office. The headline would hit the news just 2 hours later. Dominic James sues for $25 million in wrongful death and systemic negligence. But this wasn't just a lawsuit against Gregory Holt. Dominic was aiming higher, wider. He filed claims against the Homeowners Association for ignoring repeated complaints about Gregory's threats over the years. The private security firm for failing to report activity the night Malik was killed. And most damning of all, the neighborhood itself for cultivating a culture of silent, shared racism masked as safety. The documents were airtight, page after page. Every report, every email, every line from Gregory's past now public. The number? $25 million. But everyone knew this wasn't about money. This was about accountability. The legal system hadn't moved. So Dominic moved it. That afternoon, cameras swarmed the courthouse steps. Protesters held signs that read, Malik's life mattered. No more excuses. He walked. They covered it up. Dominic didn't arrive with a press team. No entourage. Just his legal counsel and a black folder tucked under one arm. He walked up those steps in silence. The crowd parted for him. Not with cheers, but with respect. With expectation. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. He just delivered the papers. And that was enough. Behind the scenes, the system scrambled. HOA board members received dozens of emails. Angry phone calls. 2 quit the same day. The security firm deleted its entire website by sunset. Gone. Wiped clean. One of Gregory's old employers posted a public statement. We do not condone the actions or beliefs of Mr. Holt, and he is no longer affiliated with our company. Even a brand that had sponsored community events for that gated neighborhood pulled out, removing banners, donations, all of it. The name Gregory Holt was now toxic, and Dominic had made sure no one else could hide behind him. The lawsuit didn't just shake the courtroom. It shook the country. Legal analysts flooded TV screens, breaking down the implications. This isn't just a civil suit, one said. It's a roadmap, a warning shot to every gated community turning a blind eye. Some news anchors, the same ones who once showed Malik in a hoodie, now ran corrections. They played the unedited video on loop. They read from the filings. They aired interviews with experts, neighbors, and, finally, Malik's classmates. At no point did Dominic ask for an interview, but the world listened anyway, because every step he took echoed. Every motion file mattered. He hadn't stormed the gates. He had quietly rewritten the rules. Inside the courtroom, the defense scrambled. They filed for delays, requested dismissals, claimed defamation. But outside, the people weren't waiting. Malik's photo, holding snacks, walking calmly, became a symbol. A mural appeared downtown. Let them walk home. Then, finally, the pressure broke through. The district attorney's office made the announcement at 9 a.m. on a rainy Thursday. Second-degree murder charges filed against Gregory Holt. It had taken months. Footage, lawsuits, protests, outcry. But now, the criminal system had to speak. And Dominic? He didn't show up with balloons. He didn't cry in front of cameras. He stood beside Malik's mother, one hand on her shoulder, eyes forward. The caption under their photo read, "They called it justice. He made it real. He hadn't wanted vengeance. He wanted truth exposed. He wanted systems challenged. He wanted his nephew's name cleared and honored." And now, as the courtroom prepared for trial, Dominic wasn't done. He was just finally being heard. The courtroom was overflowing. Every seat taken, every aisle lined. Reporters pressed against the back wall. Activists in black hoodies. Mothers clutching tissues. Teachers who had once graded Malik's homework. Neighbors. Strangers. A city holding its breath. Gregory Holt sat at the defense table. Wrinkled suit. Sunken eyes. The cocky posture was gone now, replaced with a quiet, twitchy stillness. He looked like a man who just realized the world had stopped believing him. And across the aisle, Dominic James. Black suit. No tie. No emotion on his face. Just focus. Just stillness. Just presence. And beside him, Malik's mother, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. A crumpled tissue lay forgotten in her lap. Then the judge entered, and the trial began. The prosecution's opening was devastating in its simplicity. A child walked home. A man shot him. That's not safety. That's murder. No drama. No theatrics. Just truth. Then came the evidence. The jury watched the video, full, unedited, in silence. Malik's walk. Gregory's approach. The gun. The shots. The fall. No threat. No struggle. No words. Just two pops. And silence. Then came the messages, pulled from Gregory's private email. Tired of these kids walking around like they own the place. Next time, I'm not asking questions. You know what they say about hoodies. Then came the HOA records. Complaints ignored. Meetings dismissed. Emails that quietly cheered Gregory on. And then came the online posts. From anonymous accounts traced back to Gregory's IP. Articles blaming crime on race. Memes mocking victims. Messages full of fear and hate, all dressed up as community vigilance. The defense tried to fight back. He was afraid, they said. He made a terrible mistake, they pleaded. But the jury wasn't blinking anymore. Because this wasn't a man who panicked. It was a man who planned. One final moment sealed it. A photo of Malik from the week before his death. Smiling, holding a notebook from school. Hoodie up, hands in his pockets. The prosecutor let the photo hang on the screen in silence. Then she said, "They told you he looked suspicious. This is what they saw as a threat." She turned to the jury. This boy didn't die because of fear. He died because someone decided he didn't belong. And then she sat down. The room stayed still. The judge called for a recess. Dominic didn't move. Malik's mother stared at the screen, tears streaming down her face. No one clapped. No one spoke. Because it wasn't over yet. But something had shifted. 2 days later, the verdict. The jury was out for 19 hours. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, some praying, some holding signs, some just standing there, needing to witness it. Inside, Dominic sat in the same seat, hands folded, eyes straight ahead. The judge entered. The bailiff called for silence. The jury filed in, and the foreperson stood, a single sheet of paper in hand. The judge asked, "On the charge of second-degree murder, how do you find the defendant, Gregory Holt?" The answer came clear. Guilty. There was no applause, no cheers, just a collective release. Malik's mother bent forward, head in her hands. Dominic reached across, placed one steady hand on her back, and whispered something no one else heard. She nodded, slowly, silently. Gregory collapsed into his chair, breath caught in his throat like the word itself had crushed his lungs. His lawyer reached out, but Gregory didn't respond. 2 deputies approached. He was cuffed, quietly, quickly, led away without a word. He didn't look back, because there was no one left to defend him. Outside, the news broke fast. Phones buzzed. Tweets exploded. Gregory Holt found guilty in death of Malik James. Some cried, some hugged, some just stared up at the courthouse, not quite believing justice had come. Not completely, not cleanly, but finally. Dominic didn't speak to the press. He didn't need to. He walked out the courthouse doors beside Malik's mother, the crowd parting once again. No one asked questions. No one needed to, because the verdict had already said it all. Guilty. The sun rose over the neighborhood like it always had, soft, golden warm. But everything had changed. Where weeds once grew through cracked pavement, now stood something radiant, modern, and alive. A building of glass, steel, and light. At the front, in bold lettering etched into a silver panel, it read, "The Malik James Youth Innovation Center." 2 stories tall, solar-paneled roof, wide windows that reflected the sky. Inside, rows of glowing computers, 3D printers, robotics kits, and labs filled with color and code. It wasn't just a building. It was a promise. Dominic James had funded every square inch. Quietly, completely. No sponsors. No plaque with his name. Just one purpose. To give kids who looked like Malik the tools to dream, and to make those dreams real. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew hundreds. Students, parents, educators, neighbors. Even those who once peeked from behind blinds now stood outside, unsure, ashamed, but present. Malik's friends wore matching T-shirts with his name across the chest. His teachers stood near the front row, some with tears in their eyes. And his mother stood in silence, holding a small bouquet of white flowers. She hadn't spoken much. She didn't need to. Her presence spoke louder than words. When it came time for speeches, local officials tried to offer hopeful remarks. A principal talked about opportunity. A city councilman called it a step forward. But it was Dominic's words that stopped the crowd cold. He stepped to the mic without a script, wearing a simple dark suit, a white ribbon pinned to his chest. Behind him, the building gleamed, its glass walls catching every glint of sun. He didn't mention the lawsuit, or the verdict, or the months of rage, fear, and grief. He talked about Malik, how he once dismantled a toaster just to see how it worked, how he beat video games without cheat codes, how he said, "One day, I'll make an app that makes homework do itself." And then Dominic turned slightly and pointed behind him. He didn't get to finish those dreams, he said, but now hundreds of other kids will. Because if the world won't protect our children, I'll build the shield myself. The crowd didn't erupt. They didn't cheer wildly. They rose, one by one, in silence, in unity, in honor. The ribbon was cut, and the doors opened. Inside, kids ran toward touch screens and digital whiteboards. Some sat quietly in swivel chairs, testing out learning games and programming apps. On one wall hung photos of Malik, laughing, shooting hoops, covered in cake on his 12th birthday, wearing the hoodie he died in, but smiling wide, alive, and free. Across the street, some of the houses still belonged to the same neighbors. They watched from their windows, the same ones that once stayed shut when a child was killed outside their doorstep. But now they saw something else. Not police tape, Not silence, not fear, but a name, a center, a legacy. Malik James, no longer whispered, now carved in glass, lit by sun, and surrounded by joy. Dominic stood at the entrance until the crowd began to thin. He didn't pose for cameras. He didn't give interviews. He simply watched the children, laughing, learning, building, and finally, after everything, he let himself feel something close to peace. He closed his eyes for a moment and imagined Malik walking through those doors. Backpack on one shoulder, head held high, as if he owned the place. Because in a way he did. He would always belong.